What happens when curiosity drags you into a labyrinth of liquid darkness? For two thrill seekers in Spain's deadliest cave, the answer was a nightmare that defied survival. Until it didn't. The Costa Brava coastline, a sun-soaked stretch of northeastern Spain, is famed for its golden cliffs, crystalline waters, and beaches dotted with umbrella pines. Tourists flock to its resorts, Tossa de Mar, Lloret de Mar, to snorkel in coves where sunlight dapples schools of neon-colored fish. But beneath this postcard-perfect veneer lurks a maze of underwater caves, carved over millennia by tectonic shifts and corrosive saltwater. The most infamous of these is Cove dels Arace, a jagged fissure hidden 23 feet below the surface near the remote Cap de Creus Peninsula. Locals call it the Cave of Caskets, a nod to its history as a graveyard for overconfident divers. Spanning just 262 feet from entrance to terminus, the cave seems deceptively manageable. Its narrow, tubular structure branches into smaller chambers, their walls lined with fragile clay and limestone. Stalactites drip from ceilings like stone icicles, while the floor slumbers under a blanket of fine silt, sediment so delicate that a flick of a fin can cloud the water into zero visibility. Unlike larger cave systems, Cove dels Arace lacks natural light beyond its mouth, plunging divers into absolute darkness within seconds. Yet its compact size is precisely what made it lethal. Tight passages twist unexpectedly, creating disorienting siltouts that trap even seasoned divers. The cave's grim reputation stretches back decades. In 1987, a French speleologist vanished while attempting to chart its chambers. His body surfaced weeks later, bloated and tangled in kelp. In 2003, a British marine biologist drowned after panicking in a silt cloud. Her camera later recovered with photos of eerie, bioluminescent fungi lining the walls. By 2014, the Spanish government had banned public access, posting warnings in 4 languages along the coast. But the cave's allure persisted. Underwater photographers risked fines to capture its ghostly beauty, while thrill seekers swapped coordinates on dark web forums. To them, Cove dels Arace wasn't a tomb, it was a trophy. Ricard Montoya and Denisio Rojas, both 28 and born in the coastal town of Girona, had built their friendship on dares. As teens, they'd leap off 30-foot cliffs into the Med, laughing as lifeguards blew whistles. As adults, they chased ever riskier highs, base jumping from Barcelona's Torre Glories, free soloing limestone crags in the Pyrenees. Their bond was forged in adrenaline, their trust absolute. If one jumps, the other follows, their childhood friend Carlos once remarked.
Cave diving, however, was a new frontier. Unlike open water dives, where surfacing is always an option, submerged caves are claustrophobic puzzles. A wrong turn, a stuck tank, or a stirred silt bed can seal a diver's fate. Ricard and Denisio knew the risks, but their confidence bordered on arrogance. After a night of beers in Girona's Plaza Independencia, they vowed to conquer Cove dels Arace.
Their preparation was meticulous, if not misguided. For months, they pored over hand-drawn maps from a retired diver, noting the cave's hump, a sloping rise 115 feet in, marking the threshold to the uncharted chamber. They consulted Dr. Elena Vasquez, a marine biologist at the University of Barcelona, who warned them about the cave's unstable silt. "It's like walking on a pillow of gunpowder," she cautioned. Undeterred, they modified their gear. Trimix tanks for extended bottom time, redundant flashlights, and a handheld sonar device to sketch the cave's layout.
Crucially, they enlisted 2 others, Luis, a freelance dive instructor, and Javier, a former rugby teammate with no cave experience. Javier's role was simple: stay on the boat, monitor their air supply via a surface marker buoy, and call for help if they didn't resurface in 90 minutes. It was a flimsy safety net, but Ricard shrugged it off. On July 18th, they celebrated at a seaside tavern, toasting with glasses of cremat, a rum-laced coffee. Denisio clinked his glass to Ricard's toast but said nothing. Later, he'd admit to Javier that something felt different in his gut. This was different.
The morning of July 19th, 2014 broke with a stillness unusual for the Costa Brava in midsummer. A high-pressure system had anchored itself overnight, leaving the Mediterranean glassy and unnervingly calm. The group's rented boat, a 24-foot Marlin Vanguard with sun-bleached seats and a sputtering outboard motor, cut through the water toward Cap de Cruz. Javier, stationed at the helm, navigated using GPS coordinates scrawled on a waterlogged notepad. Ricard and Denisio sat near the bow, their gear sprawled around them. Twin 12-liter aluminum tanks filled with trimix, neoprene gloves patched at the fingertips, and handheld sonar units borrowed from a university research team. Luis, the third diver, paced near the stern, triple-checking his regulator. His certification card, tucked in a waterproof sleeve, listed just 12 cave dives, all in beginner-friendly systems like Mallorca's Cova de Columns. As the boat slowed near the dive site, the cave's entrance came into view, a jagged fissure framed by fronds of Neptune grass, its edges worn smooth by millennia of tidal currents. Snorkelers occasionally hovered above it, lured by the cobalt hue of deeper water, but local guides kept their groups at a safe distance. That morning, a pair of German tourists paddled nearby, their GoPro aimed at a passing octopus. They'd later tell investigators they'd seen the divers descend, but assumed it was a routine expedition. Ricard, ever the showman, strapped his dive computer to his wrist, a high-end model capable of tracking nitrogen saturation and ascent rates. Denisio adjusted his buoyancy compensator, fingers lingering on the dump valve. Both men had practiced silt drills in a quarry outside Girona, learning to move with minimal fin strokes. But simulations paled next to the cave's volatile reality. Luis, unzipping his gear bag, froze. The safety rope, bright orange polypropylene line essential for navigating siltouts, lay coiled beneath a tackle box, forgotten. He hesitated, weighing the risk of delaying the dive against the group's mounting anticipation. Ricard, mistaking his pause for nerves, clapped him on the back. "Relax. We've got this." The trio descended at 9:17 a.m., their bubbles rising in silvery trails. Sunlight speared the water, illuminating particles of plankton drifting like dust motes. The first 115 feet unfolded smoothly. Ricard led, his flashlight beam skimming walls of creamy clay striated with iron deposits. Denisio trailed, documenting the route with a waterproof slate. Luis lingered near the entrance, his eyes darting to the silt floor, a layer of fine sediment as unstable as powdered sugar. Experienced cave divers treat silt like radioactive waste. Standard protocol dictates laying a guideline from the entrance, securing it to rocks with stainless steel clips. This lifeline allows divers to retreat hand over hand if visibility drops. Ricard, however, dismissed the practice as training wheels for rookies. Years of open water dives had bred overconfidence. He believed their mental maps and redundant lights were sufficient. As they passed the hump, the water grew colder, dropping to 54 degrees Fahrenheit, 12 degrees Celsius. Denisio's computer flashed a warning. Ambient pressure 2.5 atmospheres. Nitrogen narcosis risk elevated. He signaled to Ricard, who responded with a thumbs up. Luis, lagging behind, stared at the silt. A single misaligned fin kick could trigger a disaster. At 115 feet, sunlight from the entrance still cast a faint glow, revealing fossilized shells embedded in the walls. Luis halted, gripping a stalagmite. His regulator hissed as he hyperventilated, the sound magnified in the confined space. Years later, he described the moment as a primal alarm, a realization that their plan was fatally flawed. Without the guideline, even a minor silt disturbance could erase their exit route. He signaled aboard, pointing emphatically upward. Ricard shook his head, tapping his temple. "Trust me." Denisio hovered, torn. Luis's training overrode loyalty. He retreated, kicking gently to avoid stirring the silt. The others watched his flashlight fade, leaving them alone in the encroaching dark. Ricard gestured forward, and the pair advanced, unaware their fate now hinged on a substance lighter than flour. Undeterred, the pair pushed onward, their flashlight beams slicing through water as thick as oil. The cave's architecture morphed into a surreal gallery. Walls contorted into gargoyle-like protrusions, ceilings dripping with colonies of bioluminescent plankton that ignited blue-green under their lights. The organisms pulsed faintly, as if breathing, their glow refracting through mineral veins in the rock. For a moment, the cave felt less like a death trap and more like a cathedral, its silence reverent. Ricard paused to snap photos with a GoPro mounted to his wrist, the camera's LED casting halos around fossilized sea urchins embedded in the clay. Denisio traced a finger over a spiral-shaped gouge in the wall, likely carved by ancient currents. It was easy to forget they were 260 feet below the surface, where sunlight surrendered to perpetual night. The illusion shattered as they crossed an invisible threshold. At 9:42 a.m., Denisio's dive computer vibrated, a depth alert. They'd surpassed the cave's mapped length, entering a void labeled Terra Incognita on their sketches. The water temperature plunged to 50 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 degrees Celsius, numbing their exposed cheeks. Ricard's flashlight flickered, its beam dimming as batteries strained against the cold. Both men's breathing quickened, their exhales forming silvery plumes that lingered like ghosts. Instincts honed by years of risk-taking flared. The entrance, once a reassuring glow, now resembled a distant star. As they pivoted, Denisio's fin grazed the silt floor. The impact was subtle, a brushstroke against powder, but enough to unleash chaos. A cloud billowed upward, mushrooming into an opaque haze. Within seconds, visibility dropped to zero. The particles, finer than talc, adhered to their masks and regulators. Panic short-circuited logic. Ricard clawed at the water, dislodging even more silt. Denisio fumbled for his backup light, but the beam diffused into a useless gray smear. Without a guideline, their mental map dissolved. The walls, once tactile anchors, vanished. They swam in circles, disoriented by the cave's echo chamber, a phenomenon where sound reflects off tight surfaces, distorting direction. A kick to the left felt like forward motion. A reach upward seemed like descent.
Above, Javier's anxiety spiked as the dive clock hit 90 minutes. No bubbles broke the surface. He radioed Spain's civil guard at 11:07 a.m., his voice crackling over a marine VHF channel. Mayday, mayday, divers missing in Cove del Zarace. The agency's protocol for cave emergencies was ruthlessly efficient and grim. Statistics showed a 72% fatality rate for divers trapped beyond 2 hours. By 11:30 a.m., a patrol boat arrived with Corporal Fernando Aguirre, a 20-year search and rescue veteran. His team unloaded rebreathers, devices that recycle exhaled air, and a tri-frequency sonar to penetrate the silt. Meanwhile, 260 feet below, Ricard and Denisio's air gauges dipped into the red. A standard 12-liter tank lasts 40 minutes at this depth. They'd burned through 75. Each breath became a calculation. Ricard's tank hit 300 psi, triggering a low air alarm, a shrill beep that echoed like a countdown. Then a flicker in the gloom, a hairline fracture in the ceiling, faintly backlit. Desperation overrode training. They swam upward, squeezing into a crack barely wider than their shoulders. The rocks scraped against tanks, stripping paint. Denisio's regulator snagged on a protrusion, yanking it from his mouth. He gagged, clawing for his octopus backup. The crack opened into a bell-shaped cavity, its ceiling trapping a pocket of air. A geological fluke caused by decaying organic matter, releasing oxygen over centuries. The men breached the surface, gulping rancid air that reeked of sulfur and damp stone. Their relief was short-lived. The chamber measured 6 feet across, its walls slick with algae. No exit, no light, just a temporary reprieve. Ricard's computer logged the time, 11:59 a.m. They had air for 20 minutes. Above, Aguirre's sonar detected their tank's metal. A blip on a screen, nothing more. Trapped in the air pocket, the divers inhabited a claustrophobic snow globe of doom, a space barely larger than a coffin, its walls weeping condensation onto water blacker than crude oil. The chamber's atmosphere was a cocktail of decay, sulfur from anaerobic bacteria, metallic tang from leaching iron ore, and the sour stench of fear. Every exhale pumped carbon dioxide into the stagnant void, pushing O2 levels toward the critical 19.5% threshold where cognition crumbles. Ricard's breath rasped like sandpaper, each gasp etching pain into his ribs. Denisio, anchored to a limestone knob, counted seconds by the drip of water echoing above, a metronome of mortality. Hypothermia worked its grim algebra. The 55-degree Fahrenheit water, colder than a walk-in fridge, stole heat 25 times faster than air. Their core temperatures plummeted, triggering violent shivers that burned precious calories. Dehydration compounded the crisis. Their tongues swelled, cotton dry, but swallowing salt water meant kidney failure. Survival guides cite the rule of threes: 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water. Neither applied here. Their bodies were hourglasses hemorrhaging sand. Ricard's decline mirrored a battery dying in slow motion. CO2 narcosis crept in, its symptoms insidious: blurred vision, lethargy, a false sense of warmth. His eyelids sagged, flickering like faulty neon signs. Denisio, forearm braced against the rock, hooked Ricard's buoyancy compensator to keep his mouth above water. The effort turned his muscles to jelly, each lift a Sisyphean task. Ricard's head lolled, chin dipping below the surface, a marionette with cut strings. Denisio hauled him up repeatedly, fingertips bleeding against the gear straps. Carbon dioxide concentration breached 5%, the level where motor skills unravel. Ricard's hand flopped, smacking the water in a weak Morse code only despair could decode. His final moments lacked drama: a sigh, a slackening of limbs, a slow descent into the ink. Denisio, alone, pressed his forehead to the stone, its chill seeping into his skull. The cave's silence amplified the roar of his pulse, a primal drum counting down. Above, the laws of physics conspired against them. The air pocket's oxygen dwindled as CO2 pooled, denser than air, forming an invisible lake at chest level. Each breath drew from a shrinking reservoir of viability. Denisio's thoughts fragmented, flashbacks of Girona's sunlit plazas, the taste of his mother's paella, the weight of his dive knife strapped to his calf. Survival instinct warred with resignation. To drink or not, to swim down or wait, to hope or let go. Outside, Corporal Aguirre's sonar painted a Rorschach blot of the cave, useless against the silt. Rescuers debated drilling through 20 feet of limestone, a gamble that could collapse the chamber. Time bent, stretched, snapped. In the end, the cave decided their fates, indifferent as a glacier. Corporal Fernando Aguirre's team descended into a liquid labyrinth where physics and fate collided. The Civil Guard's divers, clad in black dry suits patched with epoxy resin, resembled shadow puppets against the silt-choked water. Their gear reflected the mission's stakes: rebreathers to minimize bubble disturbance, side-mount tanks for narrow passages, and titanium carabiner-reinforced guidelines, rated for 2,000-pound tensile strength. Aguirre, a 25-year veteran of underwater recoveries, understood Cave del Zarasi's reputation, a black hole that swallowed light, sound, and hope. His team's prior mission here, in 2009, had ended with a body bag in a closed casket funeral. They anchored the guideline to a limestone boulder outside the entrance, its orange line unspooling like Theseus' thread into the abyss. Visibility hovered at 6 inches, flashlights diffusing into milky halos. Each diver maintained contact with the line, fingertips reading its tension like braille. Progress measured in centimeters, a fin kick here, a cautious reach there. The silt, still suspended from Ricard and Denisio's panic, coated their masks like powdered obsidian. One diver later compared it to swimming through a photocopier malfunction. At 260 feet, Aguirre's light grazed a fissure in the ceiling, a jagged split narrower than a subway turnstile. Sonar had missed it. The crack's angle deflected acoustic waves. Debate ensued via hand signals. Proceeding meant shedding tanks. a gamble in narcosis-inducing depths. Retreat meant abandoning Spain's first cave rescue in a decade. Volunteer diver Marcos Alvarez, lean enough to thread a needle underwater, volunteered. He clipped his tanks to the guideline, switched to a pony bottle, and wriggled upward, his spine scraping rock. The team's fate now hinged on a gap no wider than a dinner plate. Inside the air pocket, Denisio's reality unraveled. Hypoxia and hypercapnia conspired to hijack his senses. The chamber's walls pulsed like living tissue, morphing into the stucco facade of his childhood home in Girona. His mother's voice warbled through the drip of groundwater, her words dissolving into static. A phantom warmth spread through his limbs, a cruel mirage as his core temperature plummeted to 91 degrees Fahrenheit. The rescuer's lights piercing the fissure initially registered as a migraine aura. Then came the beam, a searing white lance that shattered the hallucination. A figure emerged, backlit and faceless, its silhouette bloated by gear. Denisio's primal brain ignited. Adrenaline flooded his bloodstream, overriding training. He lashed out, a wild swing connecting with the diver's mask. The regulator tore free, clattering against the wall as Marcos fumbled for his backup. Denisio recoiled, cracking his skull on limestone. Pain briefly anchored him to reality, long enough to register the Civil Guard insignia on Marcos' sleeve, before delirium reclaimed control.
A girl, monitoring via comms, intercepted Marcos's abort signal. The message crackled through the relay buoy to the surface team. Subject combative. Request familiar contact. Topside, Javier Morales, the fourth friend, stood on the boat's deck as guilt metastasized into resolve. A former rugby prop with biceps thicker than cave stalagmites, he'd never ventured beyond recreational dives in coral reefs. Now, clad in a borrowed dry suit 2 sizes too small, he resembled a sausage straining its casing. Corporal Aguirre's orders looped in his mind. Stay close. Follow the line. Don't touch anything. The cave didn't care about his inexperience. It demanded payment in oxygen and luck. Descending behind Aguirre's team, Javier navigated the guideline like a climber on a via ferrata, fingers tracing each knot. The crack, a geological afterthought, loomed ahead, its edges serrated by eons of erosion. Squeezing through required exhaling to collapse his chest, tanks screeching against rock. His dive computer flashed depth warnings. 260 feet was triple his certification limit. Blood pounded in his temples, a baseline to the sonar's intermittent pings. Inside the air pocket, Denisio floated in a fugue state. Javier's silhouette, backlit by rescuers' lights, triggered a flicker of recognition. Muscle memory from years of rugby scrums kicked in. Javier gripped Denisio's shoulders, thumbs pressing the trapezius to convey calm. But delirium had rewired Denisio's synapses. He thrashed, mistaking the gesture for an attack, and ripped Javier's mask loose. Salt water flooded the seal, stinging his eyes. Aguirre, monitoring via wireless comms, signaled the inevitable. Sedation. The rescue medic, trained in underwater triage, prepped a syringe of midazolam, a benzodiazepine that quiets neural storms. Administering it required precision. Too little, and Denisio might drown them both. Too much, and his diaphragm could stall. The needle pierced Denisio's wetsuit at the thigh, its payload flooding muscle tissue. Within 90 seconds, his limbs slackened, eyelids fluttering like moth wings. The cave, indifferent to chemistry, absorbed the drama without comment. Extracting Denisio demanded engineering worthy of a Rube Goldberg machine. The crack's 15-inch width allowed no margin for error. Rescuers rigged a carbon fiber stretcher with inflatable bladders to neutralize his buoyancy, then secured him using nautical-grade straps. Each adjustment risked dislodging silt, so movements were glacial, a ballet of fingertips and nods.
The lead diver, Marcos, assumed the role of human tugboat. Flipping onto his back, he gripped the stretcher's foot end and kicked backward, using his fins as tactile sensors against the walls. The rock gnawed at his tanks, stripping yellow paint to bare metal. Denisio's limp form swayed, his head lolling perilously close to protruding limestone teeth. One misaligned inch could fracture his skull. Surfacing took 37 minutes, a lifetime in cave rescue math. The boat crew hauled the stretcher aboard with a winch normally reserved for lobster traps. Denisio's skin had adopted a cyanotic hue, his core temperature 89 degrees Fahrenheit, a hair above the threshold for cardiac arrest. Paramedics swarmed, swaddling him in heated blankets and threading an IV into his basilica vein. Fluids warmed to 104 degrees Fahrenheit, reversing the creeping hypothermia. Ricard's recovery lacked such urgency. Divers found him 13 feet below the air pocket, suspended in the water column like a marionette mid-performance. His mask remained intact, eyes open behind fog glass, a snapshot of final moments. Retrieval was clinical, a body bag weighted with lead shot, a silent boat ride to shore. Later, the coroner would note petechial hemorrhages in his eyelids, telltale signs of CO2 toxicity. Sadly, the cave had issued its invoice, and Ricard had paid in full. News crews swarmed Costa Brava by dawn. Headlines dubbed Denisio the miracle diver, while Ricard's obituaries whispered of recklessness. Corporal Aguirre's report, published weeks later, was blistering. The divers lacked formal cave certification, a requirement for complex systems like Cave dels Arasi. Their decision to forgo a guideline was labeled catastrophic hubris. Hypercapnia, the report confirmed, killed Ricard. CO2 levels in the air pocket had soared to 7%, far beyond the lethal 5% threshold. Denisio, physically recovered, faced quieter battles, night terrors, survivor's guilt, and a lawsuit from Ricard's family. The tragedy rippled beyond Spain. The International Cave Diving Association updated its safety protocols, mandating redundancy gear for silt-prone dives. Marine biologists mapped Cave dels Arasi in 2016, revealing a second chamber larger than a football field, its walls littered with diver graffiti, including Ricard's initials. Today, the cave remains sealed, a submerged tomb guarded by iron grates. Locals say it whispers on stormy nights, a dirge for those who dared its depths. Denisio never saw the inside of a cave again. He opened a dive shop in Barcelona, teaching novices the mantra he ignored. The cave doesn't care how brave you are. In a 2019 interview, he admitted, "We thought we were explorers. We were just fools." His story, a grim bookmark in diving lore, serves as a warning. Underwater caves forgive nothing. Not ambition, not friendship, not even miracles.